ladies and gentlemen, we got a taste of it a little earlier on when the madness met the mania. Two mega powers meeting here tonight. What is happening?
Well, you know, me and Gene, we really don't know what we're dealing with here, man. And I'm just kind of a little worried about locking up here.
It's all right.
Because we just might blow the whole planet up, you know. Everybody knows that mania is the strongest force in this universe. But when I saw what the madness was all about, I realized there was a whole nother universe out there, a whole nother frontier, and the power of the madness and the mania just blew my 24-inch guns out, man.
You mean to tell me there is another solar system, Macho Man?
Unbelievable. I'm still in a state of shock right now. In fact, I don't think I'm going to be coming down for a long period of time. Yeah, reckless abandon is what I used to be. Yeah, but Elizabeth opened up my eyes, and the big man right here, the big man, yeah, he endorsed Macho Madness, and he gave me direction. Yeah. Reckless abandon used to be, but direction now with the mega powers, yeah. Mega powers, yeah. I feel the power now. I feel the power right there, big man.
Sure, it wasn't a hit over the head, Macho Man.
Oh, no, man, I'm all right. I've never been better, yeah.
Don't you worry about the hit over the head, man. I'm just worried about where we're going from here. Is it this stratosphere, man? Is it the ionosphere with the madness and the mania as one guiding force? We could go ahead and take the whole
Believe this.
He will not divide us.
Crab Corps for life, defeat the lobster scum, defeat lobster nation. The lobsters are taking over this country. We need to drain the swamp of the lobsters. This is getting ridiculous. This is getting out of hand.
He will not divide us.
Crab Corps is the greatest music of all time. I'm going to tell you right now, Tony Creations, Raw Dog Tony Creations. I'm looking at your eyes in the face, Tony. I don't believe this. I can't believe what the country's down to, but you know what? They won't divide us, Tony. Ah! You should see my mother-in-law if you think this house is divided. Ah!
To me, it's a similar thing to sort of Donald Trump saying we're going to, in bad faith, he said we're going to stop all Muslim immigration into the country. In good faith, he then got to the place, well, okay, we're going to stop all immigration from places that are being destabilized by terrorism problems. But meanwhile, he takes advantage of domestic gladio operations, terrorism, destabilization, whether it's San Bernardino, Orlando, Dallas potentially. He sucks all the political juice out of that and somehow says that that was caused by ISIS coming from Syria or something like that, when that was caused directly by our own treasonous domestic black operations problem. That's my problem with this sort of false populism, this false nationalism, where it's just sort of like we're going to shore up our boundaries and blame our problems on the immigrants.
I'm not certain Trump knows about Gladio. I'm not certain he knows about these networks.
He doesn't. He's being managed by the people who did 9/11, I think.
How?
His deputy campaign director from the very beginning is a guy named Michael Glassman, who is the deputy director of AIPAC for the Southwest. Before that, he was actually the guy who was deputized to do the World Trade Center real estate transfer by Louis Eisenberg at the Port Authority in New York to Larry Silverstein 6 weeks before it was blown up by high-tech weaponry to create a war on terror. Larry Silverstein is someone that Trump calls a great guy and a good friend, just like his Mossad blackmail honeypot buddy Jeffrey Epstein, who he also says is a great guy and a good friend. And there's the Giuliani scenario. He gave Giuliani a very key speaking role. And then, of course, Michael Pence, the guy he chose to be his vice presidential candidate. He was a co-sponsor to attack Iraq, I believe. He's an obvious Christian Zionist. Trump himself did a video to endorse Benjamin Netanyahu. So Trump is friends, self-admittedly, he's good friends with people who are highly credible perps, suspected perps in 9/11 and the subsequent wars of terror. And at the same time, same thing as Brexit. I'm not denying that there's authentic populist uprising that supports Trump, that supports the aspects of Trump where he speaks against NAFTA, where he speaks against the Iraq war, where he speaks against destabilizing the Middle East. where he speaks against the sort of destabilization of American society through wide-scale mass immigration, that type of thing. So I'm not denying that those are authentic, populist, and righteous, some of them, issues. But at the same time, it looks like Trump is managed at a very, very high level by some pretty unsavory characters.
That very well may be. But you mentioned the people that support him, and I think a lot of them understand things that Trump doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
The impulse we're talking about, the healthy sort of impulse we're talking about, is almost uniformly what I see from the Trump communities on the internet. As far as the man himself, who really knows? Because he's a pretty strange character. He's got, strange mannerisms, strange friends. I mean, he also describes Jesse Ventura as one of his close friends, and he's been at least pretending to dig down the rabbit hole for a long time. Trump's pretty hard to figure out one way or the other. He's not very forthcoming with information. He's a chronic embellisher, which makes it hard to tell whether he's embellishing for effect or just outright lying. His personality and persona would be best described as a salesman, which can be a dangerous persona to have in the White House, or to have really as a demagogue of any sort. But what's interesting to me about the Trump phenomenon is that behind him, at the human level, is a real subculture of a sort of American nationalism. Not a white nationalism, not a black nationalism, not a religious Christian nationalism, but simply a nationalism of what has commonly become a set of American values. The Enlightenment values, free trade, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, secular government, laws, and a very healthy skepticism of globalist agendas.
This is a message to you, the neoliberals, the SJWs, the fucking
blue pills,
the blue pills, the Antifa, whatever you want to call yourselves. This is why you lost part 2. You lost because you told the poor white working families in rural Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan that despite losing their jobs, despite their factories closing down and their communities emptying out, that they were the privileged ones because of their skin color, that they benefit from white privilege. You guys are the privileged ones. You guys are so fucking out of touch. You're sitting in your big comfy chairs in your large office spaces up in the ivory towers of university sociology departments, and you actually think we working class people give 2 shits and a fuck about your identity politics. You think we care about intersectional trans feminism when, look, I come from a working class family, alright? And the struggle doesn't discriminate. The struggle is the same. Our parents work their hands off to provide a better future for us so we don't have to struggle. And when their jobs left, that dream left with them. And you actually think we care about fucking identity politics when the first thing that pops into our mind when we wake up is whether or not we're gonna make rent this month, whether or not we have money for food in our budget, or whether or not our bronze tier Obamacare plan covers little Britney's weird cough. Britney is sick, so sick. We don't know what's wrong with her. It might be because we don't have enough money. We can only afford to feed her cold chicken tendies.
That's right.
And yet, you guys are the real racist ones, but you've redefined the word racism to mean power, privilege, and prejudice. You've twisted the definition so that we can't use the word against you, but you can use the word against us and against anybody that disagrees with you. Because under this new definition, all white people are racist. All people that defend white people are either racist themselves or they're self-hating Uncle Toms or Uncle Changs. You've called people that disagree with you racist, sexist, Nazis. You don't listen to us when we try to tell you why we believe what we believe. You've demonized us and dehumanized us. So that in your mind, it's okay to punch us. Because what's more American than punching a Nazi, right? It's easy to punch a Nazi. And when we are the Nazis, it's easy to hang us from trees. No offense. You have 1 foot over the line right now. A line that you do not want to cross. You are normalizing violence. And if you don't believe me, look at what this past year has been. Your side has chased down Trump supporters, beat them up, You've egged a woman that just wanted to be at a Trump rally. Yesterday, you pepper sprayed a woman that was no threat to you. She was talking to a camera crew. You pepper sprayed her because she was wearing a Trump hat. You threw rocks at people that just wanted to hear Milo speak. It doesn't matter that you disagree with Milo. You do not hit and attack and smash people with rocks just because they wanted to hear what he has to say. Once you cross that line, you are starting a war that you cannot win. You think you're so big and powerful. Step out of your bubble, step out of the liberal cities and look at the rest of the country. You're outnumbered, outmanned, and outgunned. You outfought. You cannot win this if it turns violent. If you normalize violence, if violence is okay, you cannot win. You can win by reaching out to conservatives, talking to them. Talk to Trump supporters and ask them why they believe what they believe. And maybe you'll find common ground. Maybe you might even convince us to adopt your positions, or maybe we'll red pill you. Who knows? Then you put down your fist, take off your mask. Fight with your words, not sticks and stones. Because if you do not change, you're going to lose. You need us on your side. You need to convince us why you're right, because you can't kill us. You can't kill all of us.
You cannot divide us.
Exactly. You need us on your side because Generation Z, the kids that are growing up and being born right now, they're projected to be the most conservative generation in decades, more conservative than your grandparents. And we millennials, we grew up with the internet. These kids are growing up in the internet, in a fully formed medium where they can spread their ideas and beliefs. They're gonna shitpost better than any of us combined. They're gonna harness beam magic better than any 400-pound, 30-year-old virgin. The future is in their hands and they're on our side. So unless you change your ways, you've already lost. I gotta go home now.
It's also very clear to me that there is a kind of cultural movement at present that is here to stay regardless of what happens with Trump. I can't see a way in which Trump could be so destroyed in a controlled political demolition that would sufficiently discredit all of these people. Although Trump is running as a populist, the centipedes, as they call themselves, the centipedes don't really care if you're a populist or not. They care about the policies you're talking about. Are they batshit insane or not? Are they apparently detrimental or not? Do Americans benefit from them or do they not? They're very critical of all of our foreign policy blunders, including all the ones we've named here, where these kind of conversations are not openly suppressed on the internet. It's been interesting to see how the internet has censored, suppressed, and repressed and banned them from even trying to get their message across. Reddit has been operating under the same algorithm for 10 years, and because too many posts from the Donald subreddit were trending, they had to completely rewrite their algorithm to stop the content from trending. The hashtag campaign Gays for Trump emerged as kind of a cultural statement from gay people that the left is trying to co-opt us and treat us as a monolithic whole and pretend to speak for us. But there are plenty of gay people that like Trump. The topic was trending at the top of the charts on Twitter, and the whole hashtag and all the tweets associated just vanished, disappeared, because it's not politically correct conversation. I mean, even political correctness is going to experience its blowback once its agenda becomes so transparent as it has.
What the fuck did you expect?
Excuse me, I apologize. We have a lot of Christian affiliates. I am a Christian. But I will stomp your head in if you start a fight with me, you thug scum. Anyways, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Bunch of cowards. Excuse me. I'm going to control myself right now. She is a demon damned to hell. Excuse me. I've been trying to control myself, trying to be professional about this. But at a certain point, I'm just really getting pissed. Excuse me. We're not going to have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me. If I didn't have a liberal from New York in the bathroom, I couldn't wipe my ass. Excuse me. I apologize. We have a family audience. That was wrong, and I won't do it again. You think I'm a coward like you? I'm sorry. You dishonorable, cowardly pieces of garbage.
Excuse me. Coming for you! Coming for you! We know what you're doing! I'm sorry. Piles of manipulative, lying crap! Excuse me. They're gonna burn in hell! Excuse me.
This is positive cultural libertarianism. Whether people try to spin some of the momentum into more of the same foreign policy is unfortunate, but that doesn't mean I don't support the return to a common sense in this community. And I also support them in their message of outreach to the rest of the political divide. This kind of cultural referendum is here to stay and is going to have to be addressed in one way or another. From history, it seems that culture drives politics and not the other way around. Even in Gladio situations, they have to create the cultural conflict and cultural climate in order for their political agendas to take root. So if we contribute to culture and change culture and have a new impact on culture, then we might see a new politic as well. I don't know if Trump is ultimately the leader of this movement. He's kind of a figurehead of the zeitgeist at the time. But the zeitgeist behind him is real and not a manufactured contrivance.
Amen to that. We're both sort of full-throatedly in support of the zeitgeist that's gaining momentum. And I take a great encouragement from the political and populist moment. And the strongest revolt from our oppressive status quo on both controlled political sides at this point, whether it's Trump on the right, Republican, or Bernie Sanders on the left, Democrat, that's where the energy lies in our current political moment, in the people who are revolting from this cultural status quo and cultural oppression. So I'm completely behind that moment and the people who are making that happen. My piece is I want to help guide us as a people to a non-divided, non-conquered, full-spectrum political, insightful, courageous, inclusive platform of credible and effective politics that can actually get us where we need to go. And that does take politics, that does take someone running for office to spearhead a movement sometimes. But I completely agree with you that it's the people who are, a lot of them maybe even unseen, unknown, centipedes in the trenches, underground, in the soil, moving trash through their guts, turning it into rich material for plants to grow in the next generation. There is a ton of hope in all of that. I feel like our eumenic potential is very powerful right now. I just wanted to get our politics of not of a political identity, not a politics of who we identify with, but a politics of ideas, a politics of character. I think that's where we need to go. And I believe that when that's done properly, it ends up actually being a non-divisive, trans-ideological, trans-partisan type of movement. And I think that's where we're heading towards. And I still have some hopes and little plans to at least seed some possibilities.
I'm on board. The question is, so we're in this globally fucked up situation. How do we get out of it? How do we make something out of nothing here? And I think we have to start by finding out through understanding and knowledge, how do we get the best outcomes of the diversity we already have? America is one of the most diverse countries on planet Earth with some of the most diverse cities on planet Earth. America's got to figure out its own demographic as it currently exists. Regardless of any future migration, we've got to figure out how America can even exist being America going forward. And until we do that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to import a bunch more people that we don't know how we're going to integrate with. because we've already got enough broken social trust in our own cities these days and within our own political discourse. We need to start building trust domestically before we can start bringing in things that might erode any trust. The problem is that any cautionary attitude towards immigration is being billed as a hatred or axiomatic xenophobia. But I think caution is neither fear nor hatred. It is kind of a prudent course of action in challenging times. Xenophobia and racism are kind of becoming meaningless words because of how overused they are. In the same way that racist kind of means non-racist these days, the way that literally now also means figuratively. The way words change meaning through misuse. So I don't worry about being called a xenophobe or a racist if that makes being cautious impossible. Caution is fine. I think that's a key component of everyone's moving forward, is caution. Because if we're not cautious, we open ourselves up to gross manipulation. And we have to treat the agendas that would be used to manipulate us with extreme skepticism, so we can see how they're spreading all this turbulence and how that turbulence is used to divide and conquer. And for this reason, nationalism is, to me, preferable to globalism, because there's not even a pretense of checks and balances with global government. And globalist agendas are almost uniformly destructive to the people who are subjugated by them. If nationalism is preferable to globalism, and nationalism and globalism are both on either side of this dialectical shit show, to me, the third course of action that is not predetermined to be shitty by the powers that manipulate, that sort of nationalism would have to be not the Gladio-style fascist nationalism, but maybe in America's case, an American nationalism. Not black nationalism, not white nationalism, not La Raza, but a nationalism of the Enlightenment values that made this country what it is and that have made the things we enjoy possible. We don't need a nationalism of identity politics or tribalism, which certain domestic elements are going to try and push us into. That seems to be the play in America, is a race divide. Identity politics fit right into that zero-sum game where if you don't win, you lose. Notions like identity politics continue to erode that same social trust that we need to focus almost uniformly on restoring before that anyone can join type of nationalism becomes possible. We've got to escape the dialectic manipulation, though. Gladio on one hand, and Zionism on another hand, and EU-style globalism on the other. None of them have good possible outcomes. We've got to find a different course of action than the ones we're being manipulated and herded into through lies, deception, perception management, fear, and ignorance.
Yes. It's not like we want to throw away identity. Identity is very important, and it's how we are ourselves and not someone else.
How am I not myself? How am I not myself?
It's how we have a family and then there's another family. It's how we have a country and then there's another country. Identity is actually integral to difference and diversity. So, like you were saying, we don't want our politics to be dependent on identity, because that's when we can be so easily manipulated, divided, and conquered. So in a way, I sort of see this as part of the idea of the hierarchy of sovereignty. The highest level is the commons, meaning like if we don't have ability to have water, food, clean land, these types of things, then there is no possibility for an individual life to exist. But right underneath that is the private individual, is the sovereign individual who stands there by themselves, chooses to be in relationships with their family, with their friends, with associates, has their own home, which is their castle, which no other person, no other entity can violate unethically. And then underneath that is a limited amount of sovereignty that's then delegated to a government, a national government, a local government, to protect all of everybody's individual sovereignties. And then underneath that is a limited sovereignty for the corporate sector, which is the extension of the private individual protected by law. If we see things in a properly philosophical fashion, a lot of these things that are set to us to be unresolvable dialectical oppositions and confusions and clashes of civilizations actually become very reasonable answers. If you study the problem long enough and properly enough and get enough of observation of the actual grammar of the situation, the solution will be the only thing that makes sense. It'll be the one thing that's left that makes sense to do. And so I think that's, if we can get there in terms of our politics, until it makes obvious sense to everybody at the table, then it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, it's just going to be based on brute force or covert counterintelligence or culture wars or cultural Marxism or cultural fascism. What we need is grammar, logic, rhetoric combined with human creativity at the table, and then the next generation political thinking will become very obvious and apparent. It's basically a setup partially dependent on the fact that we've gotten stuck at a certain level of thinking, where it looks like two different levels of a very large evolution of cognitive development are the only two possibilities. Meanwhile, there's a sort of infinite chain of being, of cognitive developmental possibilities, and we're going to keep moving onward and upward.
In order for any of this to happen, we need to change the way we're treating each other in this country. To heal from a divide and conquer situation, you've got to find a way to heal the divide. One obstacle I see in the way of Americans bridging any divide, there is no conversation anymore. There is almost uniformly a censoring of opposing viewpoints and a shutting down of contradictory evidence, label mongering those who disagree with us. When all those tactics fail, we just don't even listen to each other.
Hello, my name is Yoku Goku. I come from Japan. Watch my video. I will tell you about my first day in America. Day 1. Arrive in Berkeley. Here is the guy who yelled, "Go Trump, build the wall." He get his ass kicked big time. Demonstration in Berkeley start out so safe, so friendly. But then arrive anarchist, probably from Oakland. Throw rock at the police officer, light firework, burn generator, break window. Party over for the peaceniks. Shit gonna go down. Berkeley, California is home of free speech, but not if your name is Milo Yankovic. He is Russian troll, aka provocateur. He worked for Breitbart News, official news agency of America. Only true news, no fake like CNN. So fair, sad. I don't know what Milo believes in. I don't like troll. But these Berkeley people are so pissed off, so amazed. Wow. Milo's job is to piss off the lefties. Mission accomplished. Okay, so back to the guy who get his ass kicked. Free speech has its limits. This guy yelled something offensive to the protesters. Build the wall or go Trump or maybe just fuck you. Who knows? But some things you just don't say. Do you tell North Korean, your dear leader so fat? No way. Do you tell mother-in-law she's so ugly? I think not. So, this is my video. Thank you for watching. And remember, don't feed the troll. ありがとうございました。
I see a world or a nation of a ton of people pitching their conclusions at each other, but no one listening to how each other thinks the way they think. There's a difference in perspectives. There's conclusion A and conclusion B. Conclusion A needs to be able to also incorporate how people come to conclusion B, and vice versa. Instead of thinking, well, anyone who disagrees with me is this or that, and then they can be summarily dismissed and removed from political participation because they disagree with me, that's contributing to these echo chambers of null progress. Another thing I appreciate about the Centipede community is that that's the only place where people are actually disagreeing with each other and not being lampooned or smeared or otherwise silenced and marginalized simply for having a difference of opinion. The policy debates going on in the Donald are far more comprehensive and mutually educational than most political conversations I see happening anywhere else on the internet. I think unless we find a way to heal the divide, we'll still be ripe for the conquering. And I think there are some attitudinal shifts that need to change within individuals to make that possible. We can't just shut down opposition anymore. We need to get to the understanding behind the disagreement.
Seems so true. The best thing that people could do right now is to go disagree in public, and then beyond that is for someone to see what the other person is talking about in public, admit that you might have been persuaded by a new fact or a deconstruction of an analysis of a fact that you previously held. To do that in front of each other in a humble but honorable manner, I think that is where the future exists. And discourse has been so intensely subjected to so much toxicity and pollution, been wrapped in real serious open debate, and dialogue has been rejected as soundly as possible from the public sphere. So it's going to take a serious commitment to reconstructing a public sphere. And in sometimes the internet doubles as a public sphere, and in other ways it's a mimic of a flesh and blood public sphere, where you look at your fellow human being in the eyes, in physical form, and you all talk about it. And so many things are solved when human beings get in a room together. No matter what sort of like the actual serious mediators and conflict negotiators of the world all have experiences of, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Israel-Palestine, whether it's Bosnia-Herzegovina, these kind of conflict negotiators have the experience of where you get the most hyper-polarized sides in a room together, and with the proper space holding and principles in play. And very quickly, people actually develop trust. It doesn't mean that they get to an agreement. In fact, I don't think that's what the human future is about agreement. It's actually going to be a multiplicity of beautiful answers that benefit us all.
I mean, he's so blatantly stupid. He's a punk. He's a dog. He's a pig. He's a con, a bull artist, a mutt who doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't do his homework, doesn't care, thinks he's gaming society, doesn't pay his taxes. He's an idiot. Colin Powell said it best. He's a national disaster. He's an embarrassment to this country. It makes me so angry that this country has gotten to this point, that this fool, this bozo, has wound up where he has. He talks how he wants to punch people in the face. Well, I'd like to punch him in the face. This is somebody that we want for president? I don't think so. What I care about is the direction of this country. And what I'm very, very worried about is that it might go in the wrong direction with someone like Donald Trump. If you care about your future.
It makes it hard for me to believe that he's totally a patsy here, because how much money they threw at everyone to get in his way, and that even now, as we speak, Paul Ryan is actively working to undermine his candidacy. But I think it's not completely clear one way or the other what we're going to get from Donald Trump. And that's something that scares a lot of people. It's the devil you don't know versus the devil you know almost too well at this point.
Yes. And I can definitely see the potentials of some of those virtues, especially around so-called free trade, and his insistence on, when he publicly speaks about it, of not being actually an aggressive war maker, but being a deal maker.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I see supposedly the reason he really entered into the fray was his hostility towards the Iran deal, and how it's such a bad deal, and Iran is this major threat. And so that seems straight out of Benjamin Netanyahu's central casting at some level. And then my other real major concern is that he's so easily manipulable and led by false flag terrorism. He's already leaning on it heavily in terms of his usage of San Bernardino and Orlando. But of course, the Democrats are complete political vampires. They put every last family member of every last sort of state-sponsored deception, false flag hoax victim on stage and sucked some political energy from them, or the Muslim father of a Muslim soldier engaged in an aggressive militaristic wars against Muslim nations, So of course we know what we're gonna get with Hillary Clinton. It might even be worse than what we think. It appears that she's become more and more of the rational neocon choice over the years. They're showing that with Robert Kagan getting behind her and helping fundraise for her campaign. But then Trump, I get the sense he is controlled. He's manipulable, at the very least, by this Epstein Mossad honeypot. We'll see if he's willing to actually take Bill Clinton to the mat on it, because Bill Clinton is very vulnerable. Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on their relationship, their backing by Jeffrey Epstein. So if Trump doesn't go there, then I think that some of these allegations might be actually authentic. It might be that Jeffrey Epstein pled the Fifth and other amendment rights when asked about whether he was ever in the presence of minors with Donald Trump. So is he hanging something over him? I don't know. But then the other piece of it is that he's obviously so driven by some type of disjointed narcissism in terms of his image and his inability to sort of stop attacking minor people and these types of things, that kind of personality is so easily managed by geopolitical flare-ups and tensions that even if he's not blackmailed by Mossad honeypot, I see him as a Mossad's Mussolini very easily. There's no way out but like right through the middle at this point. One last thing is I can see the way in that the downsides of the movement behind Trump, definitely the upside populist national America First piece behind him, but there are some racist and sort of authoritarian elements that are part of the cultural movement behind Trump that don't exist behind Hillary Clinton. So then that way, in terms of a potentially negative cultural force, Trump might actually be a worse choice, even though Hillary Clinton is pretty obviously a worse geopolitical choice.
I don't know if I agree on that last part. Maybe Trump's vision might overlap with David Duke's vision, and that's, that shit happens. That doesn't really bear itself out when we look at a large bulk of people that are supporting him. It's for a lot more unified reasons than counter-gang scenario, in a way. Or of brigades policing whiteness or Christianity or enforcing these things. I see it as cultural libertarianism. Maybe not political libertarianism, but I see very, very strong cultural libertarianism in the Trump followers. To the degree where, authoritarians of all stripes are not treated well in rhetorical discourse.
But Trump himself is authoritarian. So this is why I actually sort of see the Trump phenomena is sort of similar to the Obama phenomenon, but designed for the nationalistic, maybe culturally alt, libertarian right. And that it's all based on identity politics and faith, and he's just sort of like playing this political game, and once he gets in there, but you don't see any mention from Trump about individual liberties, about constitutional protections, about rights. He doesn't talk about that shit at all. It's mainly about resentment. Even the nationalistic stuff is all about resentment, about we don't win anymore, they're getting over on us, we lost to the Chinese, we lost to the Iranians. There's no talk about constitutional protections. There's no talk of individual autonomy, of regional autonomy, of this actual bread and butter of libertarians. I'm not saying that they're not there in the movement themselves, but I think they're deluding themselves to actually think that there's not another part of the movement that backs Trump that's actually feeding off of his authoritarianism. And there is an authentic piece to the part of where the American people are responding to a guy who actually plays politics as a more sort of everyday guy and fights and sort of beats up his opponents. And the American people want more of that. They don't like this friendly bullshit in front of the scenes, where they're working across the aisle to destroy the country behind the scenes. His approach to NATO, I think, is very indicative of this bait and switch, where it sort of has the aura of a nationalist, but when it really is a global authoritarianism. And so everyone was like, oh, he wants to get out of NATO. No, it ended up just a few weeks ago, he said, oh, good, they took my recommendation. NATO needs to be overhauled for the real threats of the 21st century. NATO needs to be turned into counterterrorism. So to me, the neocons have already actually accomplished almost all of their aggressive war making that they really wanted to in the post 9/11 era. The 7 nations that Wesley Clark spoke of. Mainly they still have Iran left. And coincidentally, maybe that's the one that Trump is heavily hostile to in terms of why he entered the race, in terms of a lot of the people that back him, their hostility towards Iran. So in large part, what's not been done yet is a global NATO counterterrorism operation that basically installs the rest of the long war as some type of authoritarian police state in nations across the world. That's where I see Trump's anti-NATO stance actually going in reality.
So that's kind of a speculative journey we just went on, which could happen that way. It could happen a different way, And that's why it's such a coin flip. Because at the same time, he's been critical of the neocon strategy in the Middle East for years. Most of what he says about NATO is that if other countries aren't going to fund it, we shouldn't fund it either. Because countries are supposed to donate 2% of their GDP to fund NATO, and only 5 countries in NATO are doing that. And he's saying if they're not going to do it, then we shouldn't do it either. Much of his talk about Iran is just how bad of a deal that was. Not that we need to make a war with Iran a fundamental reality. He's talking about how it is indicative of weakness within American executive leadership. And I can't really disagree with him there. That's not a deal you make from a position of strength. That doesn't mean you have to be openly hostile to Iran. I think it's very good that we haven't gone to war with Iran. That's a losing game. I don't see him openly advocating for these hostile foreign interventions. I know on one occasion he said he wanted to carpet bomb ISIS, but that was over a year ago, and he hasn't repeated anything like that since. I see him talk about negotiating far more than any sort of military action. I see him talk about...
He does talk a lot about torturing and killing the family of the terrorists.
He didn't expressly say killing. He said take them out. Which could mean killing. It could mean killing.
Well, Obama's already doing it, but Obama doesn't talk about it.
And Obama's also banned immigration from certain places, but nobody talks about that either.
Yes, right. Obama's deported a lot of people too, but
There's no way he could be a racist. No way it's xenophobic when he does it. And that's kind of the hypocrisies that people are getting tired of.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical of all these people. What I see from Trump, there seems to be some rationale to some of the things he's talking about. Certain policy ideas I don't think are good. Not every policy idea that gets floated around gets acted on and pushed out no matter what. But I'm skeptical of the ability of any politician to campaign one way and then govern a very differently. Mm-hmm. We saw Bush do that. Mm-hmm. We saw Obama do that. Campaign Obama has been very, very different from the President Obama. Mm-hmm. I'm skeptical of all these people for that reason, is that there's such a stark difference between the way people campaign and then the choices they make once they're in office. I see a guy who's polling higher among Latinos, blacks, than any other Republican candidate in recent history.
He uses imagery, I think, in a way. That's part of it. It's not just that he's sort of like using a turn of phrase, but he uses these metaphors of hitting people that you disagree with.
Sure. He says attack a lot. He warned Ted Cruz not to attack him. He says how Megyn Kelly attacked him. I mean, these are attacks, but not in the physical violence sense. And another pattern with Trump is that, like, he attacks people who've attacked him first, except for Jeb.
Yeah.
Jeb had to be gotten rid of. and he did a fantastic job of that.
He wrecked Jeb.
He wrecked Jeb.
Low energy.
Sad. Completely sad.
Completely sad.
Some of his rhetoric when he's trying to have his security people get rid of Bernie Sanders supporters is very funny. And some of it has spawned an entire meme, the Coates meme, which has traveled widely amongst centipedes.
You know, it's sort of fun. Isn't this more exciting? You go to a Jeb thing and you fall asleep. We had 4,500 people Jeb had 101. There may be a remnant. No, there's a remnant. Yeah, he's right there. Throw him out into the cold. You know, don't give them their coat. No coats. No coats.
No coats became a recurring theme of Trump's event as protesters interrupted Trump at several points throughout his speech.
It's all funny, and the people who miss the joke are wildly off the mark with what they think this Trump thing is, and that's why they've proven to be so ineffective at stopping him, because they don't understand at all that this is funny.
Yeah. But I think they're starting to find his weak spots, just in the last few weeks. They figured out that you attack his composure, his sanity. But Trump, if he's for real, he has tons of ammunition on Hillary Clinton. That's maybe how we'll see if he's for real. Definitely one thing that can be said for Donald Trump is he shows the potential of truth politics. Because even in his sort of limited hangout, red herring stuff about Jeb's brother, George, in terms of Iraq and 9/11, Ted Cruz's dad and the JFK assassination, he basically knocked them both out of the race with that stuff, largely. So imagine if we had some full-on truth candidates. I think things would change very quickly, actually. I think the Americans are ready for truth.
Yep, absolutely. Even if people don't get what they want out of this election, I think the readiness is only going to keep moving forward.
We're on the rise.
The election was going to be about other issues, and Donald Trump made it about these issues. This election has basically been a referendum on Donald Trump, and he's not even the incumbent. Simply by talking about these issues, like in the politics of truth, he brought the center to him, in a way. He brought the national discussion to the things that he was talking about. Whereas previously, all the other candidates were going to be content to talk about very different issues. He's talked about the things you actually have not been supposed to talk about in this country for a very long time. And things that people are for, like NAFTA. People gave up on thinking that there was even a political recourse to NAFTA. Bernie, to a lesser extent, really helped push against those agendas. Some of this is certainly real. What's hard to do is separate the tricks from the sincerity.
And to know what's what.
We'll see what happens.
Better yet, let's participate in the happening.
Yeah.
Let's not make it like M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where all the actors just die on screen from some unknown, unportrayed force.
Is that what happened in The Happening?
God, it's so bad. Nothing actually happens to the actors. It's called The Happening, but nothing actually happens to them. They just, fall down and die.
Oh, it's terrible what's happening. Walk backwards for a few seconds and then...
Oh, that's right. They did walk backwards for a few seconds. And sometimes...
Sometimes they even froze in their tracks. Imagine the tension.
Sad. 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 Sad.
But it's a great sign that there's strong opposition and that the only candidate for the Republicans who took these serious oppositional stances, especially in terms of globalization, the war, that type of thing, is the person who's won out. So that's a good sign. The downside of it, I think, is sort of potentially very, very, very heavy, and the parameters of these 9/11 creeps surrounding him are very bad news.
I know that if I were a 9/11 creep, I would try to surround both sides of the election, though, to influence the outcome either way in my favor.
As they do, yes, exactly.
Yeah, and attempts to gain influence are not always attempts at securing that influence. For example, the 9/11 creeps wanted to go to war with Iran a long time ago. And the reason we didn't and haven't yet is because that agenda hasn't succeeded yet.
Yes, and it's been stopped a lot of times from inside.
So not everything the 9/11 creeps want to do, they've been able to do yet.
True.
And even evil sons of bitches are fallible.
Yeah.
So there's some solace in that not everyone neocons try to surround themselves with is automatically in the pocket. But it is cause for concern. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. He might be buddies with them. He may not know the deal, but he's definitely buddies. He's buddies with Larry Silverstein.
It's possible for him to be buddies with Larry Silverstein based purely on their shared business.
Real estates.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, true.
But Trump likes to say, I'm a businessman. My job's to get along with everybody.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that as well, that side of business, which is that Business requires mutually beneficial arrangements a lot more than politics does.
Yeah.
Because you're negotiating deals, you're not dictating terms of engagement to people.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with one of your business partners, there's no army to send in to go deal with your business enemies, you know. You can try dirty tactics, but you can't use the same ones that politicians use on their enemies.
Yeah.
There's no gladio between real estate developers trying to false flag their rival real estate developers.
The level above that there probably is corporate gladio, but
yes,
probably not so much in real estate.
Yeah, with like Coca-Cola and the way they've been murdering union activists and stuff in Central America, that's all there.
Yeah.
The mentality of someone who's spent their career in business is different than someone who's spent their career in government, because you have different tools at your disposal, different means of achieving your ends in business than in politics. Someone who's been commanding all the violent apparatus of the state for decades is going to be well versed and willing to use that violent apparatus, whereas someone who has built whatever relative success they have through negotiation and consensus building will have different skill set to rely on in conflict situations.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Donald Trump has a long track record of bodies behind him at this point.
But speaking of the trail of bodies, Clinton's is getting longer by the day. Have you guys been following that story?
Longer and longer.
Man, like, since the DNC leaks, there's been, like, 4.
Yeah.
That's a subplot that keeps on giving. It's a slow burn, but it's a burn.
Getting burned, feeling burned.
They're feeling the burn in their urn.
I'm sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails. Delete them already, then. Yep.
There must have been a huge server. Or the selfish asshole.
As the sun comes up, I want you to think real hard and tell me, what good have you done this past year? You see, if you cannot come up with an answer to that simple question, it's probably 'cause you are an asshole. And I got a news flash for you. No one likes an asshole.
Losing isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning. So if you're one of those individuals that consider the outcome of this election a loss, you're in the way. President Obama's initial campaign was based on change, and we followed him. And that's because in reality, our lives don't get better by chance. It gets better by change. Think about it. If you want to lose weight, you got to change your diet. You got to change what you eat. To me, the job of the president isn't to manage people's lives. It's to manage massive events and entities. Now, let's get down to it. The problem is we live in an age of social engineering. And the problem with this election is that both Trump and Clinton use social engineering as a fear tactic. For those of you who don't know what social engineering is, social engineering is a technique that relies heavily on human interaction and often involves tricking people into thinking systematically. I don't know about you, but I ain't good at functioning systematically. You think the parallel between Obama's campaign and Donald Trump's campaign of change was mere coincidence? Some of the things in this video I'm saying may piss you off. The truth is, I want you to be pissed off. Hopefully this pisses off enough people to say, I'm gonna step up and do my part. I'm gonna help change this shit. I want you to be pissed off enough to say raising our children is not just about providing shelter and food. It's about spiritual guidance. It's about critical thinking. It's about preparing them for tomorrow. I want you to be pissed off enough to say the next generation is coming up behind us, that we're gonna educate them enough in this political system to realize they have a voice. We have a voice. Spirituality, people. Where the hell y'all at? What are you upset about? Get pissed off. But get pissed off enough to really make a change.